We're going to continue in our series this morning, and we've been talking about what it means to be the kind of church that we need to be. When we're living in the South, it's something that's very iconic to this area in particular, because we are part of the Atlanta Metroplex, and we are home of Coca-Cola. Isn't that right? Some of you are really excited about that. It is an iconic brand, right? It's so dominating that it has actually taken over an entire category of beverage. Because if you're in the South, that's what Coca-Cola has done. For example, if you wanted a carbonated drink up north, they use a generic term. They do. So if you want to, if they ask you for a carbonated beverage, you know what they ask you? Would you like a? Thank you. Pop. Not in the South. Because Coke is the dominant, iconic beverage. So much so, every carbonated drink is it's right. So somebody asked me, hey, you want a Coke? Yeah, I love a Pepsi. Right? It doesn't matter because everything's a Coke. Everything is a Coke. And now you would think a brand that is that powerful, that is so enjoyed, that is so celebrated, would never have difficulties in gaining market shares throughout the world, right? But what I've read recently is that as powerful and as well known as that Spencerian script, that red and white Coca-Cola brand is, when Coke first introduced itself to the Chinese market, they had an incredible time doing so. Why? Because they didn't realize what the Coca-Cola name translated literally to the Chinese meant. When they first introduced Coca-Cola to the Chinese, it was literally translated as female horse stuffed with wax. They didn't gain a lot of market share at that time. In fact, Coke had to research the 40,000 plus characters in the Chinese alphabet to find the right phonetic equivalent. Now, the name Coca-Cola or Coke, I don't know, Cola, and it's phonetically in Chinese. It means happiness in the mouth, right? They've gone far. The point being is, something happens when you have a good product, but if you don't connect well with it, if you get lost in translation, if you have a problem communicating well, you know what? It doesn't matter how good the product is, right? It can be impacted negatively. And the same is true when I was thinking about what we as Christ followers experience. We know Jesus. He is the most powerful, most wonderful, most amazing, incredible gift that humanity can ever even imagine. And yet, you know what the recent statistics have shown us is that currently Christianity among many people in the American population sees Christianity as a societal extreme that is negative to our world. In fact, the fastest growing spiritual demographic in our nation are considered the nones, those who do not have any religious affiliation. Why? Because they don't see following Jesus relevant to their lives. And I'm thinking, how can this be? How can this be? It's not because Jesus isn't powerful. It's not because Jesus isn't wonderful. It's not because Jesus is everything our souls long to have. But something that has happened in translation, hasn't it? Something has been an issue in communicating to our world. And that's what we're going to address today, because we've continued, like I mentioned, we're in the midst of a series right now that we've been asking the question, what does it really mean to be the church Jesus intended us to be? And what does it really look like for a church or an individual follower to live out the life he envisioned for us? In fact, what's keeping us from living in a way that changes the entire world? So what we did is we began the series, And with an this series, we unpacked a couple of terms. One of the expressions we've used is the word missional focus. Missional focus. What does that mean? A missional focus is a focus to fulfill the Great Commission. And what's the Great Commission? Well, it's that bold charge that Jesus gave right after his resurrection and right before he ascended into heaven. Matthew 28, verse 19 and 20 tells us, "Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." See, the Great Commission is the bold, advancing task that we as Christ followers have to change the world for good and for his glory so that people can be forgiven of their sins if they turn to Jesus in faith and experience this new life in him. See, it doesn't get better than that. So what has happened in translation? See, we introduced another expression, not just a missional focus, but we had introduced the term on mission to express the kind of people we are. We are people who are on mission. What does that mean? It's simply joining Jesus to seek and save those who don't know him yet. See, if this isn't so in mind, in fact, these things are so integrated in who we are at First LG that it's part of our mission statement. Our mission statement is this: we exist to connect with people where they are to help them become passionate followers of Jesus. This is our way of describing the Great Commission in our particular way, also including the elements that allows us to have a missional focus on our lives. The first message, we talked about that first element, which is to be passionate. See, those with a missional focus are passionate about Jesus. Passionate about what he has done, passionate about what he's going to do in our lives. 2 weeks ago, I introduced the second element of what it means to have a missional focus. And it's to be intentional, not just passionate. We are to live and be intentional about availing ourselves to what the Lord has instructed us to be. We don't live our lives just randomly. We're filtered and guided and informed by the scriptures, the Bible. That's the way we operate. That's the way we live and we move forward. But today, in addressing the translation issue, we're going to unpack the third element. The third element of what it means to live with a missional focus. And that's to live relevantly. We are to be relevant. And that's the third thing. I think I'm going to lose the marker. Yeah, we may need another one, Dave, because the cap was already off. So I'm going to have a lot of writing. Thank you, Dave. All right. So that's what it means. In fact, the term, the element of relevancy is, in fact, in our mission statement. See, when we exist to connect with people where they are and help them become passionate followers of Jesus, guess what? The connection part, connect with people where they are, is the relevant aspect of our statement. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So today what we're going to do is we're going to look at the New Testament book of John, chapter 4. Go and make your way there. And we're going to look at the longest conversation Jesus has had with any individual person. The person was a woman who found herself alone at a well, but not alone, because Jesus found her there. In fact, more than the conversation with the disciples, it was with her that Jesus had the longest recorded conversation in the scriptures. And we're going to see how wonderful Jesus is, how relevant Jesus is, and how we are to be relevant with our lives as well. So we normally stand as we honor the reading of God's word today, but I'm going to unpack almost the whole chapter. So we're going to read through and I'm going to go along the way. So if you have your pen, get it out. If you've got a notebook, get it out because we're about to go. I'm going to go really quickly. So here we go. John chapter 4, verse 1, it says, "Now Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that he was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John. Although, in fact, it was not Jesus who baptized, but his disciples. So he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. He was in Judea, and Galilee was in the northern part. And in between was the area of Samaria. Okay? Verse 4. Now he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about the 6th hour when the Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" Verse 8, his disciples had gone into the town to buy food. Now, just giving you some context of where this passage is found. See, what's interesting about what we're stepping into is not just the length of the conversation Jesus had with the woman, but actually the placement of the conversation Jesus had with a woman. Because right before, in the chapter before, we see Jesus speaking with Nicodemus. And why is that interesting? Is because of the sheer contrast of the two figures that Jesus had interaction with. See, Nicodemus was a man, obviously, a moral man, a spiritual man, an influential man. He's a man of high position. But what we find here in chapter 4, Jesus has a conversation with a woman, an unidentified woman, and we're going to discover later on, an immoral woman. Certainly not influential. She was more infamous than influential. And what we find in this is the underscoring that no one is beyond the reach of Jesus. It doesn't matter if you're down and out like this woman was, or if you're like Nicodemus, up and out. It doesn't matter because Jesus meets each and every one of us. We're going to see that more and more in her story. See, not just the length of the conversation, it's the placement. But within this length, we find a beautiful reality. Verse 4, Jesus had to go through Samaria. Now, geographically, it's a straight shot. When you go through Samaria, it's the shortest route. But let me unpack the cultural dynamic at the time. You see, for a good Jew, that means you do not associate, you do not deal with, you do not get around. In fact, you cannot stand Samaritans. They are a despised people. Why? You see, when the northern kingdom was taken captive, was taken to captivity by the Assyrians, what happened is the people in the northern kingdom began to intermarry. And the people of the southern kingdom who held tight to the faith in God saw that as a betrayal of the nation, the compromise, thank you so much, Dave, the compromise of their faith. And they looked at them with absolute disdain. How can those people, they were those people, right? And they looked at them as the half-breeds. That's what the Samaritans were. And so for a Jew, it doesn't matter that it's a straight shot from Judea to Galilee. A good Jew, I don't care, it meant you added hours to your trip and miles to your camel or your donkey. You go around Samaria because a good Jew wouldn't even want the Samaritan dirt on your feet. That's how bad it is. And so when we read that Jesus had to go through Samaria, by the way, was Jesus a Jew? Yep. So is this an expected thing? Absolutely not. The term, Greek word that is translated have to, can also be translated, it was necessary. The disciples didn't compel Jesus to do this. It was necessary for him to do it because he was compelled by the Holy Spirit. So that's the context for Jesus. Let's get a little bit more understanding about the woman. Verse 6 tells us that it was the 6th hour this all unfolded. Now, the Hebrew understanding of time, the first hour is about 6 o'clock. So the 6th hour is when? Noon, right? Now, if you're like me, You don't want to do anything at noon. Why? Because it's too hot. I don't care if it's the middle of winter. For me, it's just too hot. I'm just out natured that way. Now, by the way, I love speaking outside today. Now that the weather's cooler, it was so much better. Oh, anyway, thank God for the weather change. But that's getting back to the message. It was noon. You know the expression, pictures worth 1,000 words? The snapshot of a woman going to draw water at noon speaks volumes. It speaks of the person that is engaged in that thing. Because typically what happens is women gather water in the mornings or in the evening. What's cooler? Because it's a chore to take the water, to get the water. And they also do it in groups for two reasons. One is for socialization because, women do everything in groups, right? Right, guys? But it was also for protection. So what is this woman going by herself in the hottest part of the day? It speaks of her past. It speaks of who she is. She's a woman that was broken. She was a woman that did not want to be around people because people didn't want to be around her either. See, what we're going to find out later is that she had 5 husbands. Now, being married 5 times is not very common even today, but it was almost unheard of back then. And so this speaks to and points to a woman that was more than just someone who just couldn't find Mr. Right. This woman's messed up. Her life was a wreck. And you look at that and you go, how does a person find himself like that? Well, it's the same way that we find ourselves like that. See, the picture of a woman going to the well is a physical satiating of a need for water, right? There's a thirst. But it points to an emotional, spiritual longing. Because our souls thirst. Our souls thirst. And many times what we do with a soul craving, we try to match it or fill that craving with an earthly thing that really do not satisfy and in the long run, destroying. She finds herself in this terrible situation, this broken and just painful, messed up situation, one small step at a time. She was longing, perhaps, for love. All of us want love, right? There's not a single one of us that say, I don't need it. But she chose to find her soul satisfaction in the arms of a man. And then another. And then another. And then another. Until it got to a point where her life is continued to unravel around her. Because here's what happens. Only the spiritual realities of Jesus can truly satisfy the soul. And when we try to satisfy a spiritual craving and a spiritual thirst outside of Jesus, we're going to keep learning the things that will not satisfy, which in turn will become toxic in the long run and destroy us. See, that's the reason why some of us are in the place that we're in today. See, because in this room, we have a room full of people who've experienced life and experienced breaking and wounding and pain, right? And we found ourselves where we are like this woman, perhaps not in the same avenue, but perhaps we feel like, you know what, I want to feel significant. And all of us long for significance. But here's what we've done. We wanted to find significance in the thing by that which we possess. So what we try to do is we try to buy that car or that house or that thing or that whatever. And we have paid for it with our lives, We have no time. We're always exhausted. We are in debt like you won't believe. And we're in a world of hurt. But it all started with this initial purchase of having that thirst satisfied. And it goes on and on. Some of us, we want to find ourselves, just connected. And so we wanted to be person in the know. So what we do is, I just want to get, just have some information. And before you know what, starting to put your nose into areas of lives that you don't need to stick your nose into. And all of a sudden you start dispensing information. And you end up being this gossip that people can't stand because you're ruining the people's lives all around you by destroying their character. See, you just wanted to relax. You just want to find some relief. So you take that hit. You drink that drink. You go to that website. And before you know it, you're addicted. You get where I'm going with this? See, when we look at that woman and we go like, oh, look how bad she is. Maybe we need to be more mindful of how she got there. But she got there just the way we often go those places. But regardless, the woman's life, it got completely out of control. The other women couldn't stand her. Men would no longer marry her. She couldn't even show her face in public anymore. And in the course of traveling down that lonely road to the well, I wonder how much she despised herself. Certainly was hoping that she would not see anyone, and she was saying, I'm not going to see anybody. Who's going to come out there? No one's going to be there. But someone was there, and it was Jesus. You know why it was necessary for Jesus to go through Samaria? Why it was necessary for Jesus to go to Sychar? Is so that he could see her. So that God can be with her. And that is the great theme of the entire scriptures. See, that's the big story that you and I are in. The good news is that God is with us. I mean, you can go anywhere in the scriptures, and that's what you can pick up. For example, go all the way to the beginning in Genesis. You go to the garden, you look at the garden, you see God walking with his creation, God with us. You see God redeeming his people, bringing his people from Egypt and delivering them out of slavery, establishing the tabernacle. Why is the tabernacle established? So that God is with us. Then afterwards, we see how God has brought forth the temple, established the temple to express God with us. Why did Jesus become a fully human and it was incarnated and lived among us? God with us. Why is it that Jesus one day is going to come back? So that God is with us forever. And isn't that good news? And the fact that God is with us is the essence of relevance. It's the essence. Jesus knows that we can't go to him. And in our shame, we won't go to him. So he comes to us. And the reason why God with us is the essence of relevance is because you can't be relevant if you're not present. So there is the beginning. That's the foundation of relevance that Jesus teaches us. And the rest of this chapter gives us the practical essence of relevance that we need to live out a life that is on mission, that's missionally focused, that goes about making a difference with our lives for Jesus in this world in the way that makes a profound difference. So here we go. You ready? All that is to establish the foundation. Let's talk about the practical how-to. And the first thing that Jesus teaches us, my mind moves quicker than my hand. He, first of all, tells us what not to do. And what's the first thing he tells us not to do? Don't avoid people not like you. Can you guys read that? Am I in the way? Okay. Don't avoid people who are not like you. Verse 7 tells us when a Samaritan woman came to draw water. Remember, Jews and Samaritans, they don't mix. And yet, where's Jesus? With a Samaritan. You know, I don't know if you've noticed, but we seem to live in a pattern where we avoid one another more than ever. And come on, let's admit it. This was going on before COVID. It was. See, we have a tendency to avoid each other on the basis of so many things. We avoid each other on the basis of race. We avoid one another on the basis of socioeconomics. We avoid one another on the basis of politics, from what town we're from, what hobbies we enjoy. I mean, you can name it. We find reasons to fracture one another in. Let me ask you, is there anybody you've been avoiding in your life? See, if we are to reflect the relevancy of Jesus, this is something that we can't do. Because what this does is it limits our opportunities. What makes a life consequential? See, what it means to be relevant is to make a difference, is to be pertinent of the time that we're in. If our lives are going to make a difference in this generation, it's not over the money we make or the things we have. It's the impact we make in other people. And if that's the case, we can't avoid people not like us, because if we do, we will limit the opportunities that we have. And there's somebody in your path right now that perhaps you've been avoiding. Won't you open yourself? See, it may be the mission that God has for you. But that's not all. There's another practical aspect of this. The other thing is, don't let your feelings affect your opportunity. Sorry, I just ran out of room. Don't let your feelings impact or affect your opportunity. Verse 6 says this: Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, what's the next word? Tired. Now, have you ever pictured the incarnate Son of God that way? Can you picture? Man, he's bent over, he's exhausted, to the point that he needed to sit down. And the practical reality is this: you're not always going to feel like being relevant. Relevant takes effort. You're not going to want to expend energy all the time. You know that person that sometimes we avoid? You know why we avoid that person? We know that if we talk to, say hello to that person, we're going to be saying hello to them for an hour. But a relevant life is a life that is present and is engaged. And we may be listening out on God's mission, God's appointment, if we let our feelings impact our opportunities. So don't do that. There's another don't we see. Don't wait to engage in conversation. Don't wait to initiate conversation. Verse 7 not only says, when a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" Isn't that interesting? See, here's our typical posture. Well, I'll talk to them if they talk to me. Isn't that true? But what did Jesus model in his relevant, powerful, beautiful life? he engages her. And you don't have to make a comment. Sometimes a simple question can start the whole process. And these three factors of what not to do will actually open our opportunities to live a life of relevance. Did you know the Gallup poll estimates that 82% of the people who don't go to church would go to church if they were invited? 82%. People are that open. In fact, we knew that to be true in our own lives. Let me just do a quick poll within us, okay? How many of us right now, if somebody came to you really nicely and said, hey, man, I haven't got a chance to meet you yet, but would you like to go to have lunch after the service? How many of you would say yes? No, come on, how many of you say yes, for real? Be honest. Some of you be like, I'm saying yes for nothing. But even in our room, there was an overwhelming majority of hands that went up. I know that it's not about inviting ourselves, but here's the reality. If it's true for us, Jesus says, if you want to live a life that makes a difference, if you want your life to make a difference in the lives of those around you, you initiate. You engage. You follow this. But wonderfully, Jesus not only tells us what not to do to be relevant, he tells us, can you imagine? There you go. What to do. What we must do. All right. Number one. Okay, I'm going to try to translate this because I understand you get lost in my handwriting. Remember that Jesus determines our value. See, what enhances our relevancy is understanding Jesus determines our value. Jesus determines that we are valuable. See, the Samaritan woman in verse 9 says, you're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? See, it was her. She recognized the difference, the distinction. Jesus didn't care about that. But that's what we also do, don't we? Yeah, we do similar things all the time. We do that with people who are not Christ followers yet. We do. See, we've forgotten, the people of God, instead of looking at people who don't know Jesus yet as someone who is waiting for us to engage them, you know what we typically do? Like the Jewish people look at the Samaritans. We look at them like half-breeds. We get disgusted with their behavior. Let me ask you, how are people who don't know Jesus yet supposed to act? Why are we surprised that they don't reflect Jesus if they don't know him? Here's what surprises me. What surprises me is for those people who say that they know Jesus that don't reflect the character of Jesus. That's what surprises me. But we shouldn't be surprised with people who don't know Jesus who act like they don't know Jesus because they don't. But here's what we have a tendency to do. We get disgusted. We determine if they're worthy or not. We determine if they're worthy of our time. And you know how this oftentimes kind of practically manifests itself? It's the way we invite people to church. We look at people and go, oh, so-and-so, they're the kind of people that should be a part of our church. And we invite people on that basis. Come on. That happens all the time, doesn't it? Oh, they're so nice. They're so established. They got this good job. They're going to look really good being a part of my group so they can. That's disgusting. What Jesus tells us, if you want to be relevant, this is what we must do, is remember that Jesus determines our value, has already determined our value. And we need to invite people on the basis of if they need Jesus or not. That's the only criteria. There's a second thing we need to remember. We need to remember that we have what we have what others want. So speak in a way that they can understand. I know that sounds obvious, but we need to make note of that. Use words that they can understand. Let's go to verse 10. We have a scriptural basis of this. Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asked you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Check out her response. Verse 11. Sir, the woman said, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? See, she understood clearly enough to want what he was offering, even though she couldn't understand what the deeper meaning behind that. Because she was like, living water, where do I get it? Do you order it on Amazon? You know, like, what do you do? And so Jesus is here talking about a drink, and that's in the context of what she was engaged in, right? She spoke the language of her activity because what Jesus was doing is connecting the physical to the spiritual, connecting the immediacy of the moment to the eternal realities that we need to know. And he does that for you and he does that for me. He does. For example, during the times that we've hurt, during the times we struggled, when Jesus has come into our lives, he didn't just address the hurt. Isn't it true in the moment that he addressed our hurts, we've learned more about who he is and what he wants? And in the same way, we need to realize, as Christ followers, we already have what everybody wants. Did you know that if you're a Christ follower, you have peace, you have hope, you have a purpose. You have freedom. You are treasured and you are loved. And these are everything that the world is dying for. We just need to speak and engage in a way that others can understand. See, what we forget is that maturity is connected with relevancy. Let me illustrate it this way. The Engel scale, there's a guy by the name of Engel who kind of wrote a scale to illustrate the stages of spiritual movement. And this is like -10, and this is 10, okay? And saying minus level are people who are far from the 0 point, and the 0 point is the conversion point. It's when the people know Jesus. Okay? And there are different stages along the way. And what happens is that when a person becomes a Christian and follows Jesus, we think it's all about this direction. But what we forget is maturity and relevancy go hand in hand. For example, you know that someone has mastery of their subject because they're able to be so simple in teaching it, right? Like, how many of you ever met a coach or a teacher and you love that person because they can say this big, complicated thing that other teachers made you go, oh, I can't stand this. I hate chemistry because I don't know what that means. And you meet this chemistry teacher and you're like, oh, that was easy. Ever experienced something like that? What's the difference? It's because that teacher understood it so well. She was able to explain it so simply. See, maturity and mastery includes relevancy. And therefore, the more mature we become in the Lord, in the same way, we need to be able to be effective to those who don't know him. So the idea is if you're able to move to one, that would mean that you're able to reflect Jesus to this level, but also to be able to relate and be relevant to that level, the negative one. If you are mature in 5, the idea is you're able to reach back to negative 5. Does that make sense? Here's what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to kind of destroy the paradigm that so many Christ followers have, thinking maturity is only one omnidirectional. It's not. It's bidirectional. If you are to live on mission, it's not just maturity, but it's about outreach. It's about making a difference in a lost world. See, and that's the difference. So what we need to do is we need to learn to speak in a way that others can clearly understand. And it takes humility. Why? Because we've got to constantly remember who we were. I've told you last time I was here that I love to talk about Jesus to people who don't know Jesus. You know why? It's a constant reminder of all that Jesus does in our lives. And it's a constant reminder of me who I was because I was there. I was there. And Jesus changed me from there. So guys, you want to make a life that's different, that make an impact and difference? You got to speak in a way that others understand. Also, remember the posture of your heart. This is huge. It's remember the posture of your heart. Remember the posture of your heart. There are facets of this posture that we need to pick up on. Verse 16, he told her, go call your husband and come back. I have no husband, she replied. Jesus said to her, you're right when you say you have no husband. By the way, would you consider that conversation kind of an awkward conversation? Yeah. But here we learn such an important facet of what it means to be an impactful person, what it means to be relevant. First posture of the heart is truth. Truth. If it's, let me do it like this. It's truth. See, Jesus knew where she was coming from the whole time. Jesus knew who she was. See, a lot of time for us as Christ followers, we think in order for us to be relevant, we need to relinquish being holy. We need to we need to look like everyone else and act like everyone else and talk like everyone else just so we can be relatable. That's not what being relevant is about. We need to maintain being holy but simply be understandable in a way because truth still matters. We are still to be a holy people. It's just that we can see the reality. We can see the truth of where people are. We see them with hope. We see them with love. We see them with truth. But we must recognize when they're hurting. We need to recognize that they are adulterers, there are alcoholics, whatever the issue is, and we must see it with a posture of truth so that we can address the need where they are. See, not in condemnation, but in understanding. But you cannot have full understanding without the truth. Truth is what Jesus offers here. But truth, the posture of truth, is coupled with the posture of grace. And that's absolutely critical. Truth and grace. John chapter 1, Jesus is full of grace and truth. Full of both. Not just one, not just the other, both. Verse 18, the fact is, you've had 5 husbands, Jesus said. And the man you now have is not your husband. What you have said, just said, is quite true. Man. Let's go back a couple of verses before everything came out in the open. Verse 16 says, go call your husband and come back. Now, let me ask you, didn't Jesus already know who she was? Absolutely. Jesus already knew she was an adulterer. Jesus already knew that he was an adulterer. But he said, go and come back. Go and come back. Isn't that precious? He says, I know who you are, but here's what I want you to know. Just as you are, you can come. Just as you are, you can come to me. It's grace. It's grace. See, a lot of times when people ask and read this passage, people misinterpret it as Jesus being insensitive, perhaps even being cruel in this moment. That's not true. This is the most loving and caring thing that Jesus does. Why? Because truth and grace is displayed. Here's what I know about this world, and here's what you know. This world hurts, right? How many of us have been wounded in this life? How many of us have scars? To deny that does no good. See, this world is a fallen world. And some of us carry wounds that are so deep, we cannot even articulate it, and we're affected in ways that we don't even understand. But here's what I know. That in order for us to address any hurt is through the hurt. Because here's what happens. When we keep things in the dark, things fester. Things turn toxic. It's only when things come to the light when we begin to see what we can do to address it. See, Jesus never withheld the truth. Jesus tells us in John chapter 16, verse 33b, in this world you will have trouble. He wasn't denying it. He was saying, but take heart. Why? He says, take heart, so suck it up and act right and be right. No. He says, take heart. Why? I have overcome the world. That's the good news. We need to admit the truth of our failure to experience the grace that he presents. Because the grace of Jesus is not in avoiding or hiding our junk. It's through that pain. It's through that weakness. It's through that wound. It's through that foolishness. It's through that stupidity. It's through that habit. It's through that addiction. It's through the issue that we experience grace. And if we don't come clean with it, we won't experience what God wants us to experience. Grace is available, but we got to come clean. See, when people come to Jesus, he's not asking us to get right. He's just asking us to come clean in terms of unload it. But here's what we often do. We try to hide. We try to preserve. Have you ever wondered why Jesus was arrested and sent to the cross? Think about it. Why was Jesus arrested and went to sent to the cross? Was it because he was healing so many people that people said, nope? Is that why Jesus was arrested and sent to the cross? I mean, did people around the day of Jesus said, if one more blind person receives their sight, I'm going to lose it. If one more paralytic walks, man, I'm going to have it with Jesus. It's enough. Quit feeding everybody. Is that why he was arrested and sent to the cross? You know why? The reason why Jesus was sent to the cross was because the Pharisees could not stand the fact that Jesus would go and hang out with sinners. Because the Pharisees are reflecting the tendency that we all have. We want to pose and come across as better than we are. And Jesus says, no, I haven't come to heal the well doesn't need a doctor. It's the sick. Guys, we act like the Pharisees sometimes, even as Christ followers. Here's what a lot of Christians do. Jesus, I give you 99% of all of me. I'm going to unpack and unload 99% of me. But that 1%, I don't know if I can let go of that and show you that. "99% of known is 100% unknown." And here's the problem when we hold back even just 1%. We will have a tendency to constantly guard and to hide and to pivot and to look over and to pour so much energy and trying to think, if God knows this, he'll never love me. If other people find out, nobody will accept me. I got to hold on. So we would rather come across seeming righteous than pursuing relevance. And Jesus saying, can you stop hiding? Can you stop hiding? Because I've got grace for you to have. I'm not here to condemn. Don't you love John 3:16? For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son to whoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. But verse 17, for God did not send this world to condemn the world. Jesus didn't come to condemn, but to save the world. Grace is only experienced through that pain, and through your hurt, through your foolishness and mine. So what do? Come clean. Come clean. Because when we have the posture of our heart, when we do these things and experience truth and grace and exhibit truth and grace, you know what we have the ability to experience? It's a thing called authenticity. I don't know about you, but I don't like people with pretense. How about you? Do you? Oh, don't get me wrong. I want to connect with everyone, but I've lived long enough that when people want to play games, I just don't have time. When people have an angle, when people want to hide, no. I just want people that I can deal with. Is what you see is what you get. And the people who live that way are able to live more that way because they understand the truth of Jesus and the grace of Jesus in their life. How do I know? Check out what the woman says. Verse 29. Come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Now, in the beginning of the story, this woman at the well was going, I don't want nobody to see me. I want to stay with him in town. I want to stay with him. What does she do? She experiences Jesus' truth and grace, and she goes to town and tells everybody, here's a man who's told me everything I've ever done. What? That's freedom. That's authenticity. And nothing is as attractive as authenticity. Because the authenticity gravitates. Don't we gravitate people with that? And as a result of this woman who is willing to finally quit hiding and go to Jesus with everything, as a result, was instrumental for the entire town coming to Jesus. See, that's the power of relevance. It's what Jesus wants to do in your life if we would simply follow his example and embrace these principles and these truths with all our being. You and I were made to make a difference in our day. But we have to do what the woman did. What did the woman do? Here's what the woman did. Verse 28, then leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Christ? They came out of the town and made their way toward him. It began with leaving her water jar. She was coming to get water, but she leaves it. Why? It's because she was satisfied in her soul. She was able to taste the living water that Jesus was offering and for herself. You see, I think the people in our world, the reason why we have a problem in translation is that we're so busy talking about concepts and principles of God, as good as they are, because if you follow the principles of Jesus, your life will get better. But here's the thing. We don't need any more information about Jesus. We need more people who have truly experienced Jesus with their lives, who have truly experienced Jesus for themselves, who have, and within them, the living water who is Jesus flowing in and through them. The reason why we're not as relevant as we could be is because it's not authentic in us. But it can be authentic beginning today. You don't have to hide. You can come forward and simply say, Jesus, here's my life. Here's where I am. I'm not going to give you just 99%. I'll give you 100. And perhaps today is the day you say, Jesus, I want to give you everything. And I want to be like you. I want to live my life reflecting you and impacting the world as you call me to make it. Impact it. So guys, in these moments, the Lord's been speaking to you. What is it that you need to let go of? What is that water jar that you need to drop so you can take hold of Jesus and what he's offering? Let's all stand as we close in prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you. Thank you that you come and you meet us where we are. I thank you that you don't expect us to be perfect because you are. We just need to be humble enough to accept the truth so we can experience your grace. Father, there are people in this room, there are people who are watching, who've been withholding, been holding back from you areas, facets, habits, thoughts, sins. And today, you want to change our life so it's beyond mere informationally we are relevant, but we're experientially authentic because we know you through and through. begins with us laying it all down. It's in Jesus' name we pray all these things. Amen.